Are we ready?
Yeah, we've been rolling.
Great.
You're listening to the UGA BCM podcast. Thank you for joining us. Well, welcome back to BCM Unscripted. This is our second episode. Last week we talked a little bit about everything. Got to know Karsyn and Ryan a little better, and just kind of talked about what's going on with our ministry, being mobile, things we've learned this semester and last semester. And today we're going to jump into what may honestly be a controversial topic for some. For others, it makes common sense. And so we're going to dive into it a little bit today. And that is simply discussing how you can be a part of a local church and a campus ministry, and honestly, why we believe you should be a part of both. And so with that said, I think one of the things that we experience here at the University of Georgia in particular, we are blessed with a significant number of strong churches and strong collegiate ministries within those churches. As such, typically at the BCM, one of the difficulties that we sometimes run into is that we become a very young ministry. We'll have some juniors and seniors that will serve in leadership positions and small group leaders and so forth, but typically we are very freshman and sophomore heavy as a ministry. One of the reasons for that is probably a win for us, I would say. That's because students are going to their local churches and getting plugged in. But there's I call it a misconception out there that that you start your university life in a campus ministry and then you transition over into the local church. And a lot of times we see folks that are juniors and seniors and we don't see them anymore. Is that a fair assessment, guys? Am I just making that up, or is that kind of what we see?
Yeah.
It's definitely a fair assessment.
Yeah. And so my question then, I guess, to you guys, because you are two people who started in the BCM and started in a local church and continued to serve in both. My question to you is, why did you stay? Why did you do campus ministry and the local church together? Go ahead, Karsyn. You want to talk?
Yeah, I've always thought that campus ministry was super important, and I knew when I came to college, I didn't know that college ministries existed in churches because I come from a small town and we have colleges there, but no college ministries in the local church. And so when I found that out, that was pretty cool. So I was like, okay, so I can get involved at a church and at the BCM. I'd known about the BCM. I went to a Baptist church growing up, and so people had told me about the BCM. I should get involved at here, and I did, and I loved it. And I stayed because I saw how when you get poured into a ministry, the benefits of pouring back into that ministry as you're older. So I have a lot of like junior and senior friends who are like my age or older than me who are like, oh, I don't come to BCM anymore because it's not for me. It's not for me. It's for the freshmen and the sophomores and the whatever and the small group leaders. And I kind of understood that at first, and they were very plugged into their college ministry at their church. They were serving, doing all these wonderful things, leading small groups, helping lead. But then that just kind of confused me because they were like, it's not for me, it's for them. And I was like, okay, maybe if you can take that stand, but, and you could say, maybe it's not for me. It's for these younger students. So why wouldn't you want to continue being a part of this and pouring in to these younger students, whether that's being on a leadership team or whether that's just being a committed junior and senior who can help disciple freshmen and sophomores and just help be a good example for them to look up to. It confused me. And so I was very passionate about it, and so I decided to stay and help.
That's good. Ryan, what's your take? You not only stayed, but now you're literally working at the local church and at the BCM at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think similar to Karsyn, I didn't really know collegiate ministries existed. Like, I figured, churches would have like a college small group or a college Bible study, but I didn't know that collegiate ministries existed at local churches. I knew about the BCM, and so coming in, and so I was like, all right, like, let me jump in. Like, this is a really cool opportunity. It didn't really exist where I came from, and if it did, it was on a very small basis, and so it was a really cool opportunity at the start. And honestly, similar to Karsyn, like not only did I find like my community, my brothers through BCM, some of the guys that I'm closest with, even still today. But there were upperclassmen that poured into me. I mean, I really think of like the three Zachs: Zach Turner, Zach Hutzel, and Zach Ellington. I met all of them through BCM. They poured into me through BCM, and so very similar to Karsyn. Like freshmen and sophomores, like they need somebody pouring in to them, and that's where I found it. I found it through the three Zachs. I found it through David Mathis and just several other people in my life that I'm still friends with. And it's this realization, kind of like when you're in high school, like you get to be like a junior and a senior. You're like, all right, like who's somebody that I can pour into? Who's somebody that I can invest into? And I mean that can be on a secular basis, like that can be on the baseball team, that can be in the theater department. Like who is it that I can pour back into because people who came before me poured into me. I think the same thing is true with the BCM. And I think initially that's why I stuck around. But also I recognized the need for leadership, the need for stability. You need stability when you're thinking of ministry, right? If you have a ministry and there is immense turnover, especially on a leadership standpoint on a year-to-year basis, it doesn't usually bode well long term for that ministry. And so you need consistency, and I knew that I could provide that. I knew that the BCM needed that, and so I had a desire to step into that because I recognized the importance of the BCM being here on campus. Our local churches are great; they're absolutely wonderful. All of them participate in events on campus. All of them participate in sharing the gospel on campus. But the reality is, those churches, they're not on campus like we are every day. They're 5 minutes away. They're 10 minutes away. They're 15, 20 minutes away. And so once you start getting farther away from the university, right, you have less of an influence there. Right. And that's where I believe the BCM is absolutely vital. And it's one of the reasons we can't write it off, and we can't just say, well, it doesn't matter. It's not important because it's not a part of the local church, right? Just because it's not directly, a direct byproduct of a specific local church doesn't mean that it's not necessary and that it's not important. It is absolutely vital to everything that we do on campus.
Well, and I would even take it a step further, Ryan, and say we are part of the local church in the sense that I know one of the comments that I've heard before, and there are even folks out there that are like actually sort of anti-campus ministry in the church world sometimes because, the argument, and it's an argument that I've made literally from the platform at the BCM, that in a best case scenario, a perfect world, the biblical model for discipleship happens within the context of local church. You see that in the New Testament. That is the New Testament model for discipleship. So I don't want to ever take that away, and that's why y'all have heard me say before, if you're a junior or senior, if you're not leading a small group, like we want you to be, if you're an established believer, like we want you to be in that small group at your local church so that we can have our groups be more missional and focus more on younger people and so forth. But the reality still is that, number one, we have students who are serving in smaller churches that don't have strategic discipleship ministries. And so they need that because they may not be getting it in the church they're serving in. And then number two, we are a really unique partnership between the state convention, between our associations, and we've got two of them that we partner with, and our local churches. And so as a result of that, we are sort of the tip of the spear for our local churches on this campus. And, that model has shifted over time. There's no question. Because back in the day, the BCM was the college ministry for all the Baptist churches. And then you had a church here, a church there that started their own college ministry. And so it would grow larger. And then it was like, well, what's the need for the BCM? How do they partner? I even heard one time it was stated to me that local church college ministries and the BCM could just run parallel together. What I would say to that is that's sort of not Baptist. One of the things we pride ourselves in as Baptists is that we can do more together than we can independently and separately. And so when you've got ministries running parallel together instead of partnering, you're never going to accomplish as much as you can when they partner together. And so, so I would say yes, absolutely, 100%. Discipleship in the New Testament, when we see happens within the context of the local church, and we are not a church. Like we are not a church. But there's something unique about what we do. I think there is. I tell students all the time that I wholeheartedly believe that every university student, every college student needs a strong Bible believing local church, and they also need a campus ministry. They've got to have a strong Bible believing local church because we're only here for a season of their life, and the church is there for a lifetime. They've got to have a strong Bible believing church because when they go away and they move away, when they come back to Athens, if they come hang out with us at the BCM, they're not going to see familiar faces. They're going to know who anybody is but me, right? But if they come back 10 years from now to a local church, they may look older, they may have more children, but they're going to see familiar faces. And so, I'm a product of the local church. But what makes us unique, and I think this is why you got to have both, is that we're truly a missions outpost. We truly are a place where, and you guys have heard me say this, students can learn to live missionally in their day-to-day world, right? They can learn to live missionally in their day-to-day world. We're wanting to produce really good church members, right? And to do that, you need college students plugged in their local church. There's no question about it. But like, we're also wanting to produce people that understand that not only do they need to be a part of a small group in the local church, not only do they need to be at worship on a weekly basis in the local church, not only do they need to be serving in the local church, but they need to be sharing with their friends in their neighborhoods. They need to be sharing with the people that they work with, right? They need to be sharing with people at the ball field where their kids are playing. And we have this awesome opportunity to do like on the field training for students in that sometimes in collegiate world, on the church side of what happens is, especially the further you get away from campus, it just becomes that you see those same 50, 100, 150, 200 believers, right? And so it's just a reminder, hey, you need that. You do need that 100%. I am a local church guy, but at the same time, if you want to truly leverage your life for the gospel, it is really good to spend 4 years getting practice on the campus that you can use in your neighborhoods, that you can use in your jobs, that you can use at your ball fields as you move on and have a family. And so I think that's been my big thing on why you need both. Why you need both. What are some of the things that you guys have heard maybe in the past about like why people only need campus ministry to meet people their freshman year, and then why do people leave campus ministry? I guess why is it that you see that transition? What do you hear people say?
I mean, I see a lot of people just get pulled in so many different directions. So like if you get really, really super involved in your church and you are a greeter on Sunday and maybe you're on the worship team and maybe you work with kids ministry and maybe you're there twice, 3 times a week, it just becomes a lot harder to go to a campus ministry and really be plugged in and pouring in there as well.
Right.
And I've heard that argument. I mean, I know Ryan and I are both very involved in our churches, and when we were students at the BCM, very involved at the BCM as well. So like, you do have to juggle and learn how to juggle and learn how to prioritize and time manage, and that's part of college, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the bigger arguments.
Yeah, Ryan, how did you? Because you were really involved in both. So like, how did you? And I like the word prioritize because I tell college students all the time, the issue is really not the amount of time you have. It's not that you don't have enough time. It's usually that you don't know how to prioritize yet.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you prioritize and were able to do both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it came, first and foremost, like, kind of why am I here in Athens to begin with? Well, I was in Athens initially to be a student, to learn and to get an education. And so like, yes, like in terms of my personal life, like my relationship with Jesus is going to come first. And as a byproduct of that, like the local church, absolutely. My second priority really like was school. And so like I had to prioritize time. I had to carve out dedicated time every single week and not be willing to compromise on that so that I could make sure that I was putting my best effort towards it, so that I could make sure that I was, getting good grades so that I could graduate. But right after that, I knew, like, kind of what you said, like, the BCM helps equip people to share the gospel in their context into what they're called to do. It's part of our mission statement. You know, we exist to connect students to Christ, community, the local church, and their calling, right? And so when it comes to their calling, right, that's not just like, you know, oh, we're only going to help the people that are called to ministry, or we're only going to help the people that are called to, you know, go overseas and go do mission work. Like, no, we exist to help students fulfill their calling in what God has placed on their hearts, in what he has called them to do, whether that's to be a doctor, whether that's to be a nurse or a teacher or a coach or whatever it is. We exist so that we can help them share the gospel in that context. Because like you said earlier, it is really easy to get that tunnel vision of seeing the same 150, 200 people every week. And all right, these are my people that I'm safe with. These are my people that I'm good. And then when I go to work Monday through Friday, or when I go to school Monday through Friday, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to get to work because I know that I get to see my friends at church, or I get to see my friends at BCM later. Like, if that's your mentality with it, then you're missing the point.
Right.
The point is, like, you're going to BCM, you're going to church, like, you're getting refreshed there, you're getting encouraged there, and you're also being equipped in those places to go and share the gospel out on the ball field, in your nursing department, out when you're teaching with other teachers, right? Like that is why we exist. And so I guess going back to the original question, like that's kind of why I chose to make it a priority, is because I saw the benefit of the access to lost people that the BCM has, that the local church doesn't always have, just because of its lack of proximity to campus.
Right.
And that's no one's fault. That's just a reality of like life.
Well, Paul Worcester, who is awesome. Paul, if you ever listen to this, shout out, buddy. You can shoot me up on Facebook. I'm sure you'll like it if you're listening to it. But anyways, Paul always says, I've heard him say multiple times, like, discipleship that doesn't have at the end of it evangelism and living, you know, leveraging your life for the gospel and living missionally, etc. He says that's just recycleship, right? And so what we want to do is come alongside our churches and help them equip their students and help place their students in a position where they can get as close to lost people as they possibly can be, right? Because the closer you are to lost people, if you're living for Jesus and you're part of that strong discipleship community and you're being poured into, and then you get as close as you possibly can to lost people, what's going to happen is you're going to see people get saved. You're going to see people who have life change, right? And so, I mean, that is the end goal of discipleship, right? That's the end goal of discipleship. So, yeah, prioritizing those things, I think, is huge. You know, I think one thing that I've heard, and I've heard this before, is that, like, campus ministry isn't, like, biblical. Like, I've actually been told that before. I don't know if campus ministry is actually biblical, because, like, the church should just do those things you're doing. I have a response to that. I'm just interested what y'all's response to that is, and then I'll tell you my response.
I mean, I certainly, I understand where they're coming from. I get it.
Can I add to that and jump in? Yeah. I would say some campus ministries aren't biblical, by the way.
Sure. Yeah.
So we'll preface it with that. I would agree with that statement about some. Go ahead.
No, I think I truthfully understand where those people come from, and there is some legitimacy to what they're saying, in the idea of, you know, if a campus ministry is just participating in recycleship, well, absolutely. Like, what's the point of that? Like, especially if it's not tied to a local church. I think the big thing that we really just have to remember, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. It's about proximity to lost people. Yeah. Right? Like, if we are close to lost people as a result of this ministry, while still being plugged into a local church, and while still trying to guide those people to the local church, I absolutely believe that that's biblical. Yeah. I struggle to understand why that concept would not be biblical. Right.
Yeah, and I would even add to that, like, if you're a campus ministry that presents yourself as a campus ministry, but in reality you're functioning like a church, I think that's a problem there.
Yep.
Because you're not a multi-generational church. You're not functioning the way you see the New Testament church functions, honestly. And I would 100% agree that that's an issue. I would also say, if you're a campus ministry and your end goal is not that connecting students to the local church and their calling, right? Those two things together, I would say, if that's not your end goal, then yeah, you're not lining up with what you ought to be doing scripture-wise, right? So yeah, 100% wholeheartedly, I understand that concept, and I would even agree that there are some that aren't doing the things that they need to do. But for us, I mean, our priorities are connecting students to Christ, to community, to the local church, and their calling. And I also think we're really um, we're equipped in a really neat way when it comes to connecting students to their calling. That there's a leadership development component of what we're able to do, and that we can focus on. That I can tell you as a former college pastor, if your college ministry is just only a leadership development ministry, it's going to be ineffective, right? Like it's going to be ineffective. But we have the freedom to be able to do that, which then in turn helps our local church-based college ministries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and last night we saw it. Like last night we had about 200 people in the room last night, and we asked the question at the end of the service that if you sense a calling into ministry, to let us know. And we had 9 students who said they were sure God was calling them into ministry or missions, and we had 11 that said they're discerning that right now. That is insane. On a uh, secular university campus, to have 10% of a gathering saying, hey, we're sensing a call into ministry or to missions. And I truly believe that part of that is because of what we're able to emphasize as a campus ministry. And part of that is also because of just our structure with leadership and the opportunities we give people to do so much of that out front tip of the spear work, right? There's so much of that you're able to do at a BCM that you're not always able to do at this age in the local church, right? Especially the larger ministry that you're in. So, what are your thoughts, Karsyn?
Yeah, I was thinking a minute ago. I'm really grateful for, like you said, how we're able to emphasize the local church, and how I think we do a really good job of that. I mean, it being part of like one of our like priorities. Because if you ask, I couldn't think of a single student that I could ask and they don't know, like they don't have a church that they go to,
Right.
like in the BCM.
Right.
Like I could ask any student in the BCM and they could tell
Those
you where
that
they
have
go to
been
church.
involved.
Yes.
Like, not the new kid that just walks in the door.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. But any kid serving, especially on the leadership team, like I think we do a really good job of prioritizing that. And I think that's really cool. And when people who have that mindset of like, oh, campus ministry isn't biblical, and that kind of preconceived notion that we can have a conversation with that person and explain.
Yeah. And again, what I would say to that person is, number one, we completely agree. Discipleship should be happening within the context of local church, right? It should be. That is the end goal. That is always the end goal. That's the New Testament model. What I would also say is this, is that if a campus ministry is structured correctly, and if a campus ministry in some capacity is connected to the local church, which we are, we're literally, like I said, a partnership with those local churches, the association, and the state Baptist convention. Then what I would say is that you have to begin to think of campus ministry not as a church and not as a competitor for a church, but as your missionaries. Like, I'll never forget when I took this job, I told our local college guys at our churches, and I told every pastor I talked to, hey, we're your missionaries. I love that y'all are called campus missionaries. Y'all don't know this. When I first got hired, I told some of the staff at the Georgia Baptist Mission Board that I would prefer that my title be campus missionary instead of campus minister, because campus minister makes it sound like I'm a campus pastor or something, right? And I'm like, that's not what I am, right? Like, we are missionaries on a mission field. Honestly, in the state of Georgia, we're on one of the largest mission fields in the state of Georgia when it comes to where you have just a mass population of people that don't know Christ as Lord and Savior. And so I think for those individuals that may go, is that really, or why can't the church do those things? I would say, when we're doing what we're doing, the church is doing those things, because you've sent us as missionaries. And so what my response to a student would be is this, is that if you want to live missionally, right, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, if you know Christ as your Lord and Savior, and you understand what the Great Commission means, and you know that you've been called to share the gospel, and you know that you've been called to teach people and to get them to connected to who Christ is, then, I mean, what better place to do that, right, than in a place that has literally been sent for decades to the campus as truly a missions outpost, right? Now I'll give it to you. Back when BCMs got started back in the day, I don't know if y'all even know this, like, it was literally just the place on campus that all the Baptist kids could show up and go to and feel safe. Like, I'm serious, that was what it was. right? And every denomination had their little place. Well, the world has changed. The world's changed. And we don't get a list from the university anymore. They used to back in the day that tells us who all the Baptist kids coming in are. Like, we don't. My buddies in LSU do, right? But we don't, right? And you know what? If we got that list and I was able to contact them in the beginning of summer, I mean, man, we'd probably have, 700, 800,000 kids in the room every week. But what we do have, which is better than that list, is we've got, 30,000 lost kids running around. And so, so I guess I would say, like, for someone that goes, I don't know of the importance or the significance or even maybe the biblical mandate for the campus ministry, I would say, I don't say this like, I want to be careful how I say it. That means I'm going to get in trouble. Usually when I say I want to be careful how I say something, I would say a couple of things. Number one, we're your missionaries. And in the same way that you're continually emphasizing, at least within a healthy local church, individuals to go overseas, to go on domestic trips, to go to church plants, you can send your students weekly to the mission field, to be trained and to reach this campus with the gospel. So if we're not biblical, again, not trying to make light of that statement, but I've heard it before. Well, then, I mean, we got bigger fish to fry, because, I mean, are missionaries biblical? Are seminaries biblical? You understand what I'm saying? Like, of course they are. Of course we want to see our pastors and our ministers trained. Of course we want to go as close to lost people as we can and share the gospel. And that's literally what we're trying to do. Yeah. It's literally what we're trying to do, just with a different title. So, let me ask you this. What do you hear from students who do both? Like, what do you hear from students who do both successfully throughout their 3 to 4 years? What do you hear from them as far as, like, what the greatest, like, joy is of doing both?
I mean, I think they're bought in to the BCM. They're bought in, like, of course, like, they're plugged into their church and they understand the importance of the local church and they're serving there. But they do both. I think, like you said, it's a mindset. They're bought into the mission of the BCM, and it changes the way they view campus. Yeah. Changes the way they view their students in their classroom and their professors and the people in the dining hall. It just changes the way they view them, and then they have a group of people with that same campus evangelistic mindset that they can work with and do life with and serve with and lead and all those things at the BCM. So, I mean, that's what I hear. People who are upperclassmen, passionate about both.
Right.
They love both.
You mentioned to me earlier, when I was telling you what we were going to talk about today, you mentioned to me that there was, like, this great joy when we do events at the BCM on campus and you see students from all over the area, like, unified together. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It's one of the things that I've loved about the BCM and I've been able to share with other students. When you are in your church, and say I'm at a college night at a church, or my church, I'm with people at Beach Haven. I'm with Beach Haven students at Beach Haven, with Eric, and it's wonderful. And I love Beach Haven. I love the church that I go to. And then I have friends at Prince who the same thing. They love being at Prince, and they love listening to Adam, and that's great. They love worshiping at Prince. But when you put students from those churches, from all of our BCM churches, all of our Baptist churches in the area together at the BCM, you have students from all the area. It's really cool because it's a beautiful picture of who we are as believers, and you have people from different churches on campus worshiping together, serving together, sharing the gospel together. And it's just, I think it's a really cool picture of, like you said earlier, who we are as Baptists and how we work together so well, and how we're stronger together. But I think it's just of Christians in general, just coming together, worshiping, and just being able to work together for that end goal of sharing the gospel on the campus around you.
So we got just a few more minutes, but Ryan, I think one of the things that I have to be fully honest about is I'm an extrovert, and you guys love being around people too. And so I think, and one of our college pastors we've talked about this before. A couple of our college pastors I've talked with about this before. Not every single student that comes in the door at the BCM and goes to the door of a local church, not every single student has the same bandwidth, right? For people that are more extroverted, that get their energy from being around other people, usually there's a greater bandwidth to do both ministries. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, because it's like I don't have to go home and just decompress and be like, okay, the last few days have been tough because I've been, hanging out with, hundreds of believers for 2 or 3 days in a row, right? Because I was at church on Sunday and I was at BCM on Monday and I was at a small group on Tuesday and then I was back at church on Wednesday and then on Thursday it was like, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted. Like, have you seen that where like some people have to make decisions about like, okay, I'm going to serve more in this role and in this other role I'm just maybe present. So in other words, like, hey, I may, and I think this is something that I would ask of students even is like, hey, if you're that person that truly, because you're getting into your major coursework and it's difficult, I don't think anybody's saying, hey, you got to be an intern at this church and be on leadership and do this and that. Have you seen people that have managed that well, that don't just get their energy from going all the time? Have you seen that, Ryan?
Yeah, I have, and I've seen it in one of my close friends, Austin Wallace. Like he went to Waddy before he moved off to Augusta to do PT school, and so I remember we would referee together at Oconee Parks and Rec. Sundays. I think he probably did another day throughout the week. He was very plugged in at Watkinsville. He served with kids. Every Sunday, every other Sunday. A very active member there, and at the same time he was leading a small group here. Right. He was on leadership at BCM, and he wasn't called to ministry. Right. He wasn't called to missions. He knows that God has called him to do physical therapy and to work with athletes and to be able to help heal them and help them get back to back to where they can play again, and in doing so, hopefully share the gospel with them. Like he knows that's what he's called to do. Right. And yet he was able to balance all of that along with school in a really effective way where look at there were like his freshman year like he was here. He was present. Mm-hmm. He got to BCM as sophomore. He's like, all right, I'm gonna be a small group leader. Right. But I don't have to do more than that. I'm just gonna be a small group leader, and that's okay. Right. And that's good. So that he could, take on a job and make a little money, so that he could have time to serve at church every week, and just seeing that, like it was really encouraging to see, like anybody can do it. Right. You don't have to be called to ministry or called to missions or called to some, quote unquote higher calling that doesn't I don't think is entirely correct. Whatever you're called to, you have the ability to balance both. It is a matter of, do you want to? Right. Yeah, and just as a word of encouragement, I would say, if your schedule's crazy and you're a junior, senior, and you're serving like crazy in your local church, I think the encouragement that we would give is, yeah, you probably don't need to be on our exec, right? Like, you may not necessarily need to lead a small group. But I do think you're missing something if you're not a part of what we're doing, at least on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Because I can tell you, the more you serve in the local church, the harder it is to be around lost people. The more you serve in the local church, the harder it is to be around lost people. So if you've got 2 extra years as a 3rd and 4th year, or maybe a 5th year, to have a captive opportunity to be around lost people, why wouldn't you take it? Why wouldn't you take it? The other thing that I would say is this, is that we have seen at the BCM a direct correlation with growth on a yearly basis with those churches that are having a significant number of their people participating with us. Mm-hmm. The closer a church is to working with us at the BCM, the healthier we see those churches be in their college ministry, and the more students we see them reach. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. I'm not going to do it, but I can name church after church after church after church. We're sitting in one right now, right, as we're doing this, who has strategically throughout their history had a close relationship with the BCM. And even in the ebbs and flow of ministry, even when things have been tough, they've been able to bounce back really fast because they've had that connection
to people on campus, and that's been big. So I just, if you're listening to this and you're one of our church folks, I want you to hear my heart and say, I love you guys. I love what you do. I love the local church. I'm a product of the local church. I'll never forget when I got hired, I literally sat down with our full-time college guys in town, and at that point, there were only 3 of them. Now there's a lot more, and I think that's a testimony to exactly what I just was talking about. And I sat down with those guys, and I said, hey, what do we need to do at the BCM to make your ministry a little better? I'm about to go work there. This is the last time I get to ask you that as a fellow college pastor and not one of the BCM guys. And I'll never forget, I went back to Jerry Johnson, who was our senior campus minister at the time, and I said, hey, here's what these guys said. And we started a process that we've now completed in all reality, where we began to look at what we did as a ministry, and we started cutting things, and we started changing things, and we made rules like, hey, we're not meeting on Sundays, and we're not meeting on Wednesdays, and we're not getting in the way of what local churches do. And you guys know, I've told leadership, if it comes down to something we're doing and something the local church is doing, we're always going to, quote unquote, in the world's terms, lose. Like, if that means we got to cancel something or change something, like, we're going to do that. So I'm a local church guy, and I want you to hear my heart when I say that. But I also want to just encourage you. Encourage your students to be as close to lost people as they possibly can be. And let us help them. Let us help them. It'll make a difference in your ministry, and it's why we do what we do. Final thing I'll end with is this. When I went to one of my bosses at the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, and I told them how we were doing ministry in Athens, and I told them about how we were emphasizing for our upperclassmen to be involved in the small groups with our local churches, I'll never forget what this individual said to me. They looked at me and they said, Tommy, either you're creating something great, or you are going to work yourself out of a job because you're not going to have any students anymore. And at the time, I laughed it off, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. What I will tell you is this. We desperately need at the BCM, and every BCM that I know of needs this, we need strong upperclassmen who are invested in the ministry to stay around. Because if we'll have strong upperclassmen who are invested in the ministry to stay around, they don't have to even serve in big-time leadership positions or anything else. But what we will see is that we will have created something great and amazing. We will have created a structure where we reach students on this campus, and we truly create a pipeline to get them plugged into local churches so that they can understand what it means to live for Christ for the rest of their life. And we can come alongside that local church and help those students learn what it means to leverage their life for the gospel in whatever context they're in, not just in a Sunday school class or a small group sitting with their 12 to 15 other Christian friends. And so I just want to encourage every single person that's listening, understand that we are here for the local church, but we need the local church too. We need the local church too, and we need students that are willing to stay and willing to serve and willing to stick around and step into leadership roles, lead small groups. And honestly, it's not for us. It's not for us. It's because our goal is to be effective in getting people to the church. And for our goal to be effective to get people to the church, we got to have people from the church that we can connect them with. Hey guys, thanks for listening today. We love each and every one of you, and can't wait to see you on Monday. And I think that's it. So go Dogs, and have a great week.